Hello. Tension is one of those things we all experience, and it's something most of us try to avoid or move away from. However, I've found that paying attention, why does that look like that? It's green to you too, right? Just making sure. They're all green. That's going to be bad. Is it possible to fix that before I talk, or do you want to just look at all of them green?
I'm on it.
Okay. Well,
Working on it.
okay. Okay, well, so,
We're going to work on it.
oh, look at magic. Great, okay. Thank you for your patience. So I have found that paying attention to tension can generate art. And I might also go so far as to say that tension is necessary for art to exist. The tension between reality and fiction in our embodied lives and in our mediated online lives is at the heart of the work I'm going to show you today called Surface Tension. And in this project, I'm really exploring the difficulty, or in some cases, the lack of desire to distinguish between those competing modes of being. So as he mentioned, before the internet and social media, I was a reporter. TV news, in my experience, was a very black and white, true or false, objective story. There wasn't much room for subjective truth or nuance or gray area, and after about a decade of that, I was really yearning for it. I feel like life and the truth, in most cases, as you get older, becomes more complex. It's definitely more complex than an us versus them, win versus lose, true or false dichotomy. And the lack of nuance in TV news is what led me to the art and photo worlds, that and a fellowship at Stanford. So also, I should say that it wasn't that big a shift as it might seem. On television, I was producing 30 frames at a time, and now I'm just working with one frame at a time. There we go. So surface tension really maps an invisible atmospheric condition of contemporary life. There's a lot of gray area in this project, and I just want to tell you briefly how it started. So at the end of every night, my kids, before they went to bed, would normally come up and give me a peck on the cheek, and that was a time to sort of decompress and unwind, and they had a lot more to say then than they ever did at dinner or after school. And one night, my daughter Dixie, instead of coming upstairs, she just picked up her iPad and blew me a kiss and then emailed it upstairs. I had a big problem with that. And I marched downstairs and gave her a talking to about how wrong this was. And as soon as I shut the door, and I'm sure every parent on different subject matter has had this experience where you're like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I have no science. I don't know what they know about the sense of touch. I just have a feeling that this is not a good thing to replace a real kiss with a picture of one. And that started me down this whole journey. So I'm going to show you a little video here about how the pictures are made, because they're very, very simple. Hope so, anyway. Let's see. Okay, there we go. So I started out thinking about human touch, the positive benefits of it, but then I also, of course, with Me Too and Ferguson, started thinking about the negative effects of extreme police force, and then that led me to the lack of touch and solitary confinement, and it just kept going on and on and on. But all the pictures, the backgrounds, relate to touch in some way. And as you can see, I shoot the pictures on a very old Deardorff View camera, and I'm basically just shooting my dirty iPad. I have an extremely big, bright light that I put on the side to amplify the markings of people who have come over and checked their email on my iPad, or the sweat and grime left over from my son's video games that I make him play on it, or me just going through my own social media feeds or news history. So in doing all of this, I think the viewer is forced to see an everyday object they usually don't. And for me, using a 19th century technology was really the best way to record all the 21st century details that our eyes can't see in real life. And I started out making the pictures not on a view camera, on my Hasselblad medium format, but I couldn't blow the pictures up enough and the fingerprints didn't stay as sharp. And I missed having a background that gave you some friction and tension with contemporary life. I did really, I like the fact that when photography was invented, people were very skeptical about it telling the truth. And so it seemed conceptually germane to have these two technologies merged together for this project. Okay. The one other thing I should say is that all the background pictures are appropriated images. Most of them, as you saw, come from people I know, and they're all amateurs. But if through social media I find one that I want to use that isn't, that is a professional photographer, then I get a license from Reuters or AP or Getty. Those are the three companies I've dealt with. But so it works pretty well. I think what surface tension does is isolate one of our most intimate layers of our daily experience in a photograph, human touch. And shooting through the fingerprints allows me to visualize the invisible and disruptive effects that technology has on all of us. The chaos and distraction caused by the plethora of messages and images and information bombarding us on an hourly basis, for me, was akin to the haptic language and the marks and the swirls of the fingerprints on top. And so I felt like this was a very good way to visualize this concept. I think that, you know, I live in Berkeley, so not everybody is all online all the time. There are people there that are very reasonable about their use of technology, but even if you don't, let's say you avoid the internet completely, you still live in the world that the internet has created, a world in which selfhood has really become capitalism's last natural resource. So when I'm online, I try to remember 5 things. The internet is designed to distend our sense of identity. It encourages us, especially Twitter, to overvalue our opinions. It maximizes our sense of opposition. It cheapens our understanding of solidarity, and it destroys our sense of scale. And some of the tension in this work comes from my deliberate effort to sequence the photographs so they veer from a protest to a hug, from Kim Gordon to a cat, from dancers to activists, or from tear gas to a tornado. But as I said, when it's edited for a show or a book, the backgrounds all relate to some function of touch. And at another time when I don't have just 15 minutes, I could tell you more about the science and the evidence connected to that. But in summary, let me just say that the science of touch convincingly suggests that we are wired. We need to connect physically with people to be happy. Speaking of which, adult sexual contact is unsurprisingly what Americans spend the longest amount of time looking at. But did you know that cat videos come in second place? And sometimes, same. I mean, my brain really degrades when I strap in. It's not green again, right? I feel like there's no way to calibrate all this information correctly, no guidebook on how to expand our hearts to accommodate the simultaneous scales of human experience that we see online, and there's like no way to teach ourselves to separate the banal from the profound. I think the internet is magic, but I also think it reminds us on a daily basis that it's not at all rewarding to become aware of problems that you have no reasonable hope of solving. And I think the surface tension photographs can be an antidote to some of the divisiveness that we experience online. I say that because these marks are visible because of dirt and bacteria and sweat. And it's not important to me that it's grime, but it is important to me that it represents how oily, messy, teary, sweaty, and imperfect we all are, how human we all are. And they remind us of our common humanity by having those fingerprints on the surface. I think that we all desperately want to be human in the face of this cold, inanimate, perfectly designed translator, but I hope that somehow the act of witnessing what we see online will make us more human and not less. So I'm going to try to whiz through this next project really quickly, and afterwards, if you have questions, you could just ask me. So while I was researching all of the science about the detrimental cognitive effects of interacting with technology all the time, I started also shooting surface tension, or started shooting this project called Relief, which you're seeing here. And I decided that I actually wanted to make pictures that looked like they've been touched, that were had their own surface. And so I started intervening with the photographs and the prints themselves. So these white marks, in the wide shot look like stars, but in fact that they are marks that I've made in the back and in the front of this image. And all the pictures become reliefs because, as probably most of you know, a relief in art history is any surface that has something protruding from it, and normally it's something blank and not a photo, but why not? So here's a short video about showing how they're made, and I'll sort of take you through it. So I shoot the photos myself. They're not appropriated. And then I get out the tools. Sometimes it's a pellet gun or darts or fire. And, the photograph for me acknowledges what we already know, what the camera can see. And then after living with the pictures by hanging on the walls of my studio for a while, I turn the best ones into reliefs with knives or flames, or sometimes I paint on them. And I complicate the surface with layers of handmade interventions. So there's a documentary aspect to it, but there's also a handmade, and they are being conflated. So I think that the interplay of order, precision, and disintegration, especially with the burning ones, because I have almost set my cottage on fire a couple times, really activates a landscape or portrait and the beauty in it. But the damage inflicted upon it, I think, allows viewers to imagine an absence or a loss, or maybe loss of control. And the violence involved in making all these marks, it's very odd. After I made about 10 of them, I realized that the pictures themselves come across quite tranquil. And it's a long, repetitious process. It requires me to be 100% present. It's a totally different thing than sitting down at my computer. I can't look away. I can't lose my balance. I can't start a new email. I can't change the podcast. I can't stop moving the tool. And it really has changed my practice and my state of mind, for that matter. Each day negotiating this emotional arc is a real, true negotiation. The shadow play, as you can see, also comes into play depending on how large they are. The larger the print, the more the intervention catches the light from the side. And when I'm making the marks on the fragile paper, I really am trying to find the point at which there is actual resistance to me or the tool, and I try to go to the point where it seems reckless to go forward or until the paper breaks. But finding that edge is often where the piece begins. So there's just a couple of more. I really am trying to create a mediated vision to represent a certain psychological interpretation of the way chance plays a role in life, some of what Phil was talking about earlier. There are days where I feel like we're all on the edge of the abyss. We just don't know it. And that drastic change can happen in an instant. So I really do want it's a very intuitive process about knowing, what to cover, what to show, what to hide, how the markings become metaphors for other things. I don't want them all to be anytime I try to put something in the sky, it always looks like birds. So I have to be really careful about that. But you don't learn that kind of thing until you make, 12 bad ones. But my hand, and not merely the camera, is making the piece. And I think it foregrounds the fact that all art has a subjective gaze. But in this case, I'm foregrounding that. I think that relief makes visible the many dark psychological states that maybe we're prone to but often hide. And that tension comes from the fact that there's a layer on top and a layer underneath. So I think that really looking at art is one of the few places in our fast-paced, tech-soaked world where we can slow down and digest our emotions. And I hope that the relief work is an invitation to do just that. I really would like my pictures to show not just the pockets of pain that we live in, but the hope that brought us there. So I'll wrap up, but let me just sign off by floating the idea that the photographers out there, next time you get frustrated and want to rip up your print or cut up your photograph, try it. See where it leads. The very first time I put a knife in a photograph, it felt sacrilegious. I got shivers. But the tension and frustration that's an integral part of the process of creating art gave me a reason to pause and think, what am I not seeing? What else is possible? And that messy, imperfect place is where I found my voice. Thank you.